Mormonism beyond the gender binary. A couple quick questions to help me know your sophistication. Please raise your hand if you have heard the word post-gender before today. Alright, thanks. And second question, please raise your hand if you have a personal friend who is intersex. Awesome. That'll help me to customize my presentation. Thanks. Brief overview. I'm first going to talk about some of the shortcomings of gender roles within society generally, but specifically within Mormonism. Second, I'm going to talk about why that gender binary, the idea that everyone's either male or female, why that idea fails. Third, I'm going to defend the view that in the future we will have a multiplicity of genders and sex rather than none. And then fourth, I will conclude about why this is a good thing for Mormons and Mormonism. Just a brief bio. I'm a straight Mormon feminist. I wrote a book last year on homosexuality, so I come from a background of LGBT activism and also feminist activism. So we'll get right started right away. The shortcomings of gender roles. So I'm part of the Feminist Mormon Housewives Facebook community, and there are a number of people on that in that Facebook community that are angry and upset. If you ever go there and read the posts and the threads, you get that motif pretty quickly. A lot of the people that are angry are, well, a lot of women, both single and married, old and young, those who have children and those who do not. There's a lot of women that don't feel like they fit into the Mormon mold. They're not happy there. The reason is because they're excluded from the governance table. Bishoprics, stake presidencies, high councils, Quorum of 12 Apostles, and First Presidency, all those governing boards of the church, not one of those has a single woman on them. Also, there are a lot of women who choose not to have children, who are single, who are infertile, who derive their self-worth and self-concept from something other than motherhood. There's a big emphasis on motherhood in the church, and for those that don't fit that mold, or those that do but don't think it should be relevant to their access to the governance table, this can be a source of great angst. A quick example, a little anecdote, there was a professor in my Master of Public Administration program, my graduate program at BYU, and she was the breadwinner of the family. Her husband stayed home, obviously a reversal of the traditional family proclamation ideal where the father provides and the mother nurtures, but this was a better situation for her family. And indeed, that's sort of the point of this whole presentation, is that it's better to focus on the individual and that individual's unique profile of characteristics rather than focusing on an individual's biological sex or gender. So there's a lot of people that are intersex, and of course they're kind of a square peg in a round hole. An anecdote there, I have a friend named Steve. Steve is a male by all appearance. However, Steve has a female type sexual orientation, meaning that he is romantically and sexually interested in men rather than women, who we classically describe as a homosexual. And of course, as with many homosexuals in Mormonism, this has caused him a lot of difficulty and has negatively impacted his self-concept and his self-esteem growing up and indeed living in this fiercely gendered Mormon world, as well as a fiercely gendered and fiercely heterosexual broader societal community in America. So those are some of the problems. I'm going to talk a little bit now about why the gender binary fails before we get into the resolutions to those problems. Again, this gender binary, the idea that everybody's either a boy or a girl. There's no in-betweens, there's no misfits, and that seems to be a pretty common sense proposition until we get down to it. Sometimes we're not really sure where to send somebody. How many of you would send this individual to priesthood? Raise your hands. How many of you would send them to Relief Society, this individual? Him or her. So sometimes appearance doesn't give it away. We're not really sure if an individual is a male or female. That's generally, if we're honest, how we discern whether somebody's male or female is their outward appearance. So we're going to do a vote again. How many of you would send this individual to priesthood? How many would send this individual to Relief Society? Again, this person has breasts, external testicles, and a penis. The Found Proclamation teaches gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. Of course, premortally we didn't have bodies, so there's this idea that there's something as a spiritual sex that existed before we were born, we took on bodies. So if you're the bishop, and imagine you're a Mormon bishop here, you're supposed to marry opposite-sex couples that come to you asking for you to perform the marriage, but reject same-sex couples that come to you with that same request. But if you don't know their spiritual sex, which, if we could look at their appearance and can't tell if they're a male or female, Obviously, if everyone's either male or female and we can't tell, then physical appearance is not a very good criterion. If the bishop can't rely on physical appearance, then he's either got to say yes to both couples, the opposite and the same-sex couple, to ask him to perform their marriage, or say no to both. It would be irrational to choose the one but not the other. So if he's got two couples that come to him in his ward that are in love and ask him to perform their marriage, Taylor and Jessica here and Taylor and Jessica, the bishop has to reject the criterion of physical appearance, and he has to either marry both couples or none. It makes no sense to send one to exaltation and one to excommunication based upon physical appearance grounded on a theology of spiritual sex. So when you come down to it, we discern physical appearance. We use that as a discriminator to determine whether someone's male or female. In reality, of course, each one of us is a unique profile of male and female characteristics. I, for instance, have a verbal fluency that's female type, meaning that on average men spend about 7,000 words a day and women say about 20,000 between the ages of 20 and 30. I say more like 20,000 words a day, so I'm female in regards to my verbal fluency, but of course I have a long genital tubercle, so generally people would consider me male. But when you really come down to it, each one of us is a unique profile of characteristics, and all of us have, if you're male, you have feminine traits. If we're female, we have masculine traits. It really doesn't make any sense to say you're male or female when we're a mosaic. Every one of us, in that sense, is intersex. It's a very important conclusion. Every one of us is intersex to an extent. Number 3, I want to defend, so we've talked about why the gender binary fails. I want to talk about the polygendered future rather than the gender neutral future, real briefly. You're looking at a picture of a mouse. This mouse has 2 parents that are both male. There were no female mice involved in the procreation of this mouse. Don't want to get into the details here, but in the near future we will be able to reproduce, most likely using artificial wombs, using any combination of biological sex of the parents. You could have 2 or 3 or 4 parents. They could all be males or all be females or some combination. We're soon going to break the gender binary of procreation, and already have, indeed, with some species. I think that most likely in the post-gender future you'll be able to freely choose gender and classically gender and sex dimensions. You can choose whether to have breasts, you can choose whether to have a penis or a clitoris, you can choose whether to have a verbal fluency of 20,000 or 7,000, etc. Eventually we're going to be able to talk to ourselves the same way that our genomes presently do, and that is going to open up a whole new world of choice. It's going to be like ordering your sandwich at Subway. So before we had this binary, I'm going to use an analogy here. We have this binary of male and female. We used to have this binary, if you're a child, when you learn about literary genres, there's fiction and non-fiction, right? But once you grow a little older and you get to know a little bit more of the nuance of literature, you realize that there are a multiplicity of genres. Fantasy, scripture, romance, fable. We're going to have that same kind of proliferation of genders once we get past the male-female binary. And that will be a good thing, as I will now conclude. I will conclude about why this is a good thing for Mormonism on 2 scores. One is marriage. The second is governance. Very briefly, you'll see there on the right is a typical opposite-sex couple. Of course, if you were to take this person's pants off on the left, you would find that this individual actually has 2 testes that are in the place of ovaries inside, doesn't have a penis, even though he looks male. The individual on the right might be more masculine and assertive than the one on the left, and that individual on the right might also have testes and might have an XY chromosome. Again, appearances can be deceiving. My point is that every opposite-sex couple that gets married is actually a marriage of 2 intersex persons, and that is also true of a same-sex couple that gets married. This is a marriage of 2 intersex persons. One of those males may be female type in regards to their genes, in regards to their genitals, in regards to their psychological attributes or their behaviors. All of us are intersex, and so it makes no sense, no rational sense, to discriminate marriage based on opposite versus same-sex status of the couple, when in reality they're all intersex marriages. Also in governance, Mormonism, we're governed by old white men. We could instead be governed by people with age diversity, with racial diversity, and with sexual and gender diversity. Luckily for us, that post-gender future has already begun to dawn, and I look forward to its full splendor.